to be able to join us, and they ask for the recording.
Of
Sorry,
course.
Tariq.
No, no, of course. Thank you. Well, thank you for the introduction and welcome everyone. My name is Tariq Smith and I'm so happy to be here. I am the program waiter with TCCN. And my background is in social science in general, and I write a lot of grants, and I'm involved in a lot of the process and outcome evaluation. So I hope today to have a nice casual kind of session. So you all are more than welcome to ask questions as we go. Annabelle will be fielding questions. I believe you can also, correct me if I'm wrong, Annabelle, you can also type questions into the chat, and
Yes.
we will have a few minutes at the end just kind of designated to Q&A as well. And of course, you are all welcome to follow up with any of this subject matter. We are here to assist in any way, shape, and form. So as you all are drafting your proposals and redrafting your proposals, we are happy to help and kind of put all of these things into play. I would also like to introduce my assistant, Brandy. She is here and she's going
Good
to.
morning.
Hey, Brandy, can you start sharing our PowerPoint, please? Our first slide, pull it up, and we will talk a bit about. I want to bring it kind of big picture and then take it down to a really simple level here because I think that's what's necessary. So I have a lot of experience in writing grants with foundations, NIH grants, R-level grants, and also state and local grants. And we got some good feedback earlier about how different funders, different proposals want things formatted in very different ways. And that can be frustrating. So I do know that when you want to get all of your team on the same page, one of the best ways to start is with a logic model. By and large, they're all going to want one. They may hate the last one you wrote, but they're all going to kind of want one, and they're all going to want their language in it. And actually, as I say that, Brandy, let me have Annabelle share first. Actually, Annabelle, can you bring up the performance measures for the NOFO? That's going to kind of show. This is a good way to bring it into this. So the first talk about is performance measures. And you all may be familiar with this term, kind of national performance measures and things. And Annabelle is going to share a NOFO that talks about certain priorities, and it also talks about different performance measures. It's important for you all to always focus on the NOFO as it's written. Kind of work with the people to make your contract language match as much as you can. But the NOFO is going to kind of lay out what this funder wants in what area they want it in. So they're gonna usually they outline certain priority areas, and Annabelle will share just a specific NOFO so we can make this kind of real and not so generic. But they have certain specific priority areas, and they may even have priority regions that they want to focus on: underserved regions, rural regions, urban, wherever where your agencies may be specialized in. So it's very important for you to look at the priority language in every NOFO and kind of line that up and build that straight into your logic model. And in doing this, your outcomes, meaning your big box at the end, you all bear with me for a second because I'm kind of speaking before I show you, but the outcomes at the end should reflect the changes in these performance measures, if you will. So if you're looking at diabetes, if you're looking at teen pregnancy, if you're looking at HIV, or you're looking at uptake on vaccine hesitancy, or whatever you're looking at, whatever the main priority is outlined in the RFA, you want those increased level of individuals with health knowledge, like those big pictures. You want your last boxes on the right to correspond with the priorities in the RFA up front. So I think that's kind of a big key point to remember at the beginning. You look at their priorities, you look at how your mission centric programs are aligned with their priorities, and you make sure that your outcomes are reflecting the priorities that are outlined in the NOFO. Now, I know I'm talking a lot now. I hope this will all kind of come together as we move. So hopefully, so actually now we'll switch back over really quickly because all of this, everything is posted to Annabelle. Everything that you all see will be given to you. It won't, you don't have it right now. You'll have it very soon. And it will also be posted. Annabelle, please tell everybody. Well, it will be it will also be posted, I believe, in the newsletters, and Annabelle will correct me.
In the website.
There you
We
go.
are, yeah, we're improving our resources section. So from now on, we already have the webinar section there, but what we're going to do is to create like a mini folder where we have the recording, the PowerPoint presentation, and every other document shared or discussed or every other resource. So within the folder for that webinar, you could find everything there. Since every time we try to send all those materials by email, sometimes we have bounce backs because it's too much. So I think that using the website for that purpose will help us better.
Thank you, ma'am. And so that will be helpful. All of these materials and resources will be available to you. You can reflect on the session itself. And then again, like I said, we are always accessible to you on a one-on-one basis to help you actually plug these things in and retool them as you need be. Along the way. So, have no fear. We're all here. So, Brandy, can you bring our presentation back up, please? And then, so I want to spend around 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so kind of doing a here about big concepts, and then we'll get down and dirty with how to actually plug these things in. We also have a template, which you all are more than welcome to, although Rhonda reminded us that no one template will ever do. Hopefully this is going to be generic enough that you will be able to at least rearrange your activity. See, hopefully when you build your logic model, I think I would argue in a sound way up front, the changes for different funders should be modest. So since your outcomes are going to be mission centric, the only things you're really going to be changing and shifting are your activities and your inputs. And in that context, uh, well, let me not get too deep into that. In that context, the stronger you build or the relationship between activities and outcomes, which is the main two columns we're going to focus on, Rhonda, activities and outcomes. The rest of the boxes, whether they want short-term, long-term, whether they want outputs, whether outcomes, all these other kind of terms that they want, are incidental once we have our main activities and outcomes columns kind of filled out. So that being said, Brandy, can you start reading for us, please? And ask questions, please. All
Absolutely.
y'all jump into, please, by all means, ask if there, anything can be clarified, because I want to make sure we're responding directly to you. Okay, let's ride, Bandy. And keep me honest too. Annabelle, can you
Absolutely.
tell me when we're at about 10, 20 or so? Thank you.
All right. So, a logic model is a graphic depiction or roadmap that presents the shared relationships among the resources, activities, outputs, and outcomes/impacts for your program. It depicts the relationship between your program's activities and its intended effects in an implicit if then relationship among the program elements. If I do this activity, then I expect this outcome. Among other things, a logic model helps clarify the boundary between the quote unquote what the program is doing and the quote unquote so what, the changes that are intended to result from strong implementation of the what.
Okay,
A logic.
pause right there, Brandy.
Mhm.
You can actually stick to the slide too. You don't have to read the don't read the big paragraph, because you can stick to the slide. Um, So the important parts right here, everyone to remember, is that this is logic models are supposed to be a visual representation of what your program is kind of set out to do. And this is kind of, there's some clumsy language. I wanted to share some of the CDC's language and everything because Rhonda's right. A lot of the language is clumsy, but this is kind of you want to demonstrate the direct relationship between the what, the how, and the outcomes. They're also going to want to measure when. So uh, actually, we'll leave that there. Skip to the next slide for us, Brandy.
Absolutely. Visual depictions of programs. Related terms. Logic models are the most common, but not the only name applied to a visual depiction of a program, such as program roadmaps, theory of change, theory of cause, theory of action, concept or conceptual maps, outcome maps, logical frameworks, or log frames.
Okay, pause right there. These are These are different terminologies, but again, they're all kind of different ways of talking about or displaying visual representations of program activities. The most common terms usually you'll run across are these roadmaps and logic models. Theories of change we'll get into a little later, but they have a. I wanted to just give you an idea of the different things that they may ask for. All of these are basically logic models. They're all visual representation of logic. There aren't fixed rules for how they're put together, but there are big concepts that you need to know to make sure that you're following the linear progression. Okay, next slide for us, please, Brandy.
Logic model key terms. Inputs, the resources needed to implement the activities. Activities, what the program and its staff do with those resources. Outputs, tangible products, capacities, or deliverables that result from activities. Outcomes, changes that occur in other people or conditions because of the activities and outputs.
Pause right there.
Impact.
Pause right
Mhm.
there. Outputs and outcomes are flexible sometimes. At times, they want outputs to be um, numbers, counts of numbers of individuals. But I think the relationship, and again, to Rhonda's point, sometimes they want a relationship between outputs and outcomes. Other times they want you just to skip to the outcomes. Look for the template that they ask you for and respond accordingly. I want to give you the terminologies that the background and the definitions for the different blocks that you may need to fill out as you go. Keep going, please, Brandy.
Impacts, the most distal/long-term outcomes. Moderators, contextual factors that are out of control of the program but may help or hinder achievement of the outcomes.
Moderators are important for your own board members as well. A lot of times you want to think about who you're writing the logic model for. So if there are variables that may impact the implementation that you will have to explain later in your narrative, that's what you need to put into your moderators. Moderators are not I'm trying to be careful with my language here. They're not asked for as frequently as the others, but I think they're a good domain for you to populate, especially as you're building your own logic models for your own internal teams, because your board members are kind of interested in different aspects of this at times than the different funders are, and that your different members or your different agents may be. Continue, please.
Key steps to useful logic model. Step 1, gather information on the program. Mission and vision, goals and objectives, strategic plans, and existing performance measures. Step 2, review the information and extract from it to create a 2-column table including column 1, activities, what the program and its staff do. Column 2, outcomes, who or what beyond the program and its staff needs to change and how.
Pause right there,
Step
Brandon.
3.
Pause
Mhm.
right. Pause, Brandy. So to Rhonda's point, these are the main categories or the main columns of any given logic model. They are your different activities and your different outcomes. And again, we will move to the left and to the right of both of these as we go, and depending on what the funder actually wants. But for as we're building our logic models from the ground up, the best my recommendation is to focus on the first main columns, and you populate inputs on the backside, and you populate long-term outcomes um, a little later as well. But the big deal here is to demonstrate the relationship between the activities and the outcomes. Please continue.
Step 3, clarify the activities and outcomes with stakeholders to ensure appropriate classification. No activities are actually outcomes, and no outcomes listed are actually activities.
These
No
steps,
major.
pause, Brandy. Thank you. These can get it's. I think that step 3 is important as well. Well, all of these are important, but oftentimes as you're building these, you want to be careful with redundancy, and you want to make sure that your activities are activities and your outcomes are outcomes. So fielding this with stakeholders, again, we're absolutely available to help you rough draft these through and figure out what actually goes where. Oftentimes it's recommended that you start off just with sticky notes that you can kind of move around up and down and back and forth before you fix your model. I guess it's enough for now. Please continue, Brandy.
No major redundancy in list of activities or list of outcomes, and no major missing activities or outcomes.
Yes.
Step 4.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Thank you.
Step 4. Decide whether the activities should be ordered sequentially. Step 5.
Keep going.
Decide whether the outcomes should be ordered sequentially.
Continue.
Step 6. Check in with your stakeholders.
So I like the idea that we're also reminding you here to check in at different points with different folks as you're building this out. These are different opportunities after you arrange things in the first place, after you decide whether they're sequential, after you line them up into their sequence. Remember the logic of all of this. If they are sequential, the logic should be evident. If the outcomes are sequential, the logic should be evident. At the end of the day, the what you're shooting for here is this linear lines that demonstrate the relationship between inputs and outcomes, and they have activities lined up, um, activities and outputs to kind of demonstrate what happens between also short-term, medium, and long-term goals. Please continue.
Step 7. If depicting the program logic in a roadmap format is desirable, then write each of the existing activities and outcomes on a sticky note or equivalent. Move the notes around to allow for drawing of lines to depict logical relationships. Draw in lines, remembering that lines may go from one or more activities to a subsequent activity, one or more activities to an outcome, or one or more proximal outcomes to a more distal outcome.
Thank you. Pause. So I want to point out here that roadmaps are different than logic models only in a sense that the relationships between activities and outcomes go in different directions. So oftentimes your programs may have things moving in more than one direction as you decide whether or not they're directional, meaning that, or let me say it a different way. If you if that are I'm sorry, if we have activities that are associated with um, different outcomes, we need to make sure that we're demonstrating that protocol, and the roadmap helps us go up and down, left and right. Continue, please. Annabelle, also, this is not your roadmap. I know a lot of our members are also involved in another roadmap for something. I don't want to confuse anyone. So this is not the roadmap for, uh, can you help me out, Annabelle?
Health
This is
equity, yeah.
Yeah, correct. This is not, I'm not speaking about the specific roadmap to health equity, and they may have their own domains that they'd like you to fill out. But in terms of these main languages, the CDC and such, they have big, um, I guess, big sweeping language. So I want to give you the different language they may ask for. Someone may ask you for a roadmap as opposed to a logic model. And when that is the case, you would simply show the line or your arrows. You would make your arrows go into boxes differently. That's all we're doing for that. Okay, continue, please, Brandy.
Step 8. Identify the activities for which outputs are desired. Identify the link between those activities and their successor activities or outcomes. Thinking about that logical link, what are the key attributes of the activity that must be present for it to produce its successor activity or outcome? Place the outputs in the appropriate place in the logic model table or roadmap. Step
That's fine.
9.
Continue, please. Yeah.
Identify, thank you. Identify the key inputs without which the program cannot be implemented. Think about broad categories such as staff, equipment, data, funds, and partnerships. Place the inputs into a column to the left of the activities in the logic model. If it is important to see the link between each input and the activity it affects, then draw arrows from each input to the related activity.
Fair enough. Keep going, please.
Step 10. If moderators are required, remember, moderators can facilitate or impede the ability of one activity/output to generate a successor activity/output. one activity/output to generate an outcome, or a proximal outcome to generate a more distal outcome.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on that. We'll just keep moving, please.
Step 11. Review and affirm the elaborations of the logic model with stakeholders to ensure it accurately represents the program and the relationships among the components.
Yep. And
Step
12.
12.
Hmm.
Create a narrative to go with the logic model. A one-page logic model will not be able to capture all the nuances of the program. The narrative will help explain the components of the logic model and how they work together to accomplish the outcomes.
That's great. So let me run my narrative bullets and then I'll pause before we get into theories of change.
Narrative continued. The
Hmm.
narrative should include the following: an expanded description of the activities, outcomes, and other components of the logic model, any key linkages between activities and outcomes, and between different outcomes, attribution versus contribution to outcomes, etc. And finally, stakeholders' expectations for what will be accomplished, etc.
So your narrative explains your logic model. Your logic model should be, as we keep repeating, a visual representation of kind of program activities. And your narrative needs to explain the relationships that exist. And you will tweak that differently for your different stakeholders. Your narrative for your board may be different than your narrative for your funding source, but you need to make sure that you're addressing all of those different components. And I want to just make sure you have kind of a step-by-step kind of way to approach this, and then the things that you need to make sure that exist inside of this framework. So are we at theories of change next, Randy? Is that what's happening?
Correct.
Okay, before we jump
Tariq,
to theories of change. Yeah, good. Thank you. Go ahead, Annabelle.
yeah, yes. Before we keep moving forward, let's show um, our audience quickly the documents that we refer to from the NOFO related with AmeriCorps. If I
Okay.
could show that quickly.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
this is an example that Tariq referred to when we were starting the presentation. We have this notice for funding from AmeriCorps where they specifically mention the funding priorities. In this one, once we read, then the entire document was huge, 73 pages. But once you look at the priorities, there was one that clearly our mission ties to it, which was helping communities recover from COVID-19. In the document, as well as the meeting that they had, and they explain how this connects with performance measures, they refer to another document, and it was part of their package, where they have performance measures instructions. And I know sometimes it's a lot of documents, but it's good to take a peek because you don't have to recreate the wheel. There's a lot of materials out there that will tell you exactly what you need to include in your logic model or proposal. When we look at this document, they make reference at the national performance measure that relates with the kind of work they do. There's multiple national performance measures out there, and I know that Tariq is going to talk a little bit more about that. But within those, there is one that is called Healthy Futures, and we immediately identify that the work that we're going to do ties with that. So by going specifically to Healthy Futures, clearly we have here what is the output and what are the outcomes that relates with that work. From here, we just actually use the exact same language that they have in their document into our logic model. We identify those outputs that really have to do with the work we were doing. This is a good example where they have an output that has to do with individual serve. Of course, every time we talk about outreach, education, or even vaccine administration, you can measure the individual serve. But there was, for example, one here, which is an outcome that said individual number of individuals who report improved capacity for independent living. That was not part of our grant. So we are not going to include that one. So we use this document as an example of, what is it that we're going to measure and how, because it even tells you how to measure it. So we literally went through the entire section and find out which ones are the ones that really relate with the work we do. Those that are not highlighted is because we determine, no, this is part of the national performance measure, but it does not tie with the work that we're going to do. So we selected only the ones that tie to the work. And with that, we created our logic model.
Thank you so
Yes.
much for adding that. Yeah, that's exactly what we do. And what Annabelle said is so important. We never reinvent the wheel. We
Mhm.
language that they offer and we plug it directly in because they're going to guide you to where they want you to go. So it will help all of you all to search the national performance measures to find what I'm going to call mission centric related objectives, because those are always going to be fair game for you. You'll always be able to the national performance measures, and these are exactly what they say they are. They are data that are collected by these national agencies in their public domain, and they're set out for you all to be able to compare your program's success to them. So I'm so glad that you shared that example with us, Annabelle, because that is exactly how you write these. You open them up, you drudge through the 75 pages, and you find the 3 or 4 bullets that are relevant to you and that are always mission centric. Again, remember, they don't like to fund folks that are just chasing funding. So you want to make sure that those national performance measures are aligned with your mission, and that you can line that right up in your outcomes, like Annabelle said, with your different activities, and that those linear lines that show the inputs through the outcomes should reflect how your activities, how there are inputs on the front end, how your activities in the middle are going to influence these outcomes, which are going to be compared to these national performance measures. Thank you so much, Annabelle. That's perfect. Keep going. Oh,
Theories of change.
okay. Wait, let me talk about there's a change really quickly. Okay, questions. Are we good on questions, Annabelle? We're all right for now. We're going to keep going.
Yeah,
Yep,
we so far we have no questions, but Rhonda is asking for the links, and yes, I'm going to pull that one in particular has to do with AmeriCorps, but there's multiple other places that we can find that, and we're going to add those links as resources.
absolutely. Absolutely. There are plenty of links to national performance measures are everywhere. Actually, if you Google national performance measures, it'll give you a whole bunch of different ones. But again, they're for everything.
And
Because
you can also search by specific illness, like, and we did this test, Tariq and I, yesterday. Like, if I'm right now, I'm going to share something really quick. I just typed national performance indicators for diabetes, or for, there's multiple topics for cancer, and you immediately get to, and the best ones, of course, mostly the CDC, and they give you multiple options. The National Institute of Health. You see, there's multiple ways, and it was just typing in national performance measure and which one specifically you're looking for. Um,
that's right. And you need to make sure again that we are in line with these performance. So the things that you are measuring need to be on scale with the national measures. So you may show that your rural community is underserved here and here and here and here, and those will also be identified in NOFOs as well. They'll have priority populations. They'll have different things that the funding is geared toward, and your job is to respond to that and to find the performance measures. Remember, the inputs all the way on the left and the performance measures kind of all the way on the right. And then your job is to populate the middle and demonstrate how your program is helping your individual communities do better in comparison to these national performance measures. So now we're going to talk about something big, which is theories of change. And this is kind of another big concept deal, but I want to really give it to you straight. So a theory of change kind of is what your program theory is organized around. If you all are doing more individual, if you're working directly with individuals on individual capacity, let's talk like vaccine uptake here. If we're talking about individual hesitancy or something, and you're doing more individually geared programs, or you're dealing more community scaled programs, you will need to demonstrate where you got that logic from. So you need to, in support of your logic model needs to be built around some overarching theory of change. And these things are evidence based. I know you're running across all of these words in your grants, right? So these things are evidence based. They got citations and stuff. They're tried and true, and they've been used and kind of fielded out in the field. So now we're going to talk just for a few minutes about theories of change. And I want to give you 3 or 4 just really good ones that are always useful that you can use as is. Go for it, Brandy.
Theories of change. In a logic model, arrows are drawn to indicate the links between resources, activities, and outcomes. A theory of change is used to provide a rationale for the expected links between program resources, activities, and outcomes. Health promotion and prevention activities are based on numerous theories of change. A reasonable explanation of why and how a certain set of activities leads to certain outcomes. These theories are based on our beliefs, expectations, experience, and conventional wisdom. They describe the set of assumptions that explain both the steps that lead to long term objectives and the connections between program activities and outcomes that occur at each step of the way.
Right. And that's, now remember, these are not our own theories. So this isn't just why we think people do things, but this is how our logic, where we got our logic from. Okay. Continue, please, Brandy.
Prominent theories of change. Stages of change model. Stages of change model with the citation. This model views behavior change as a sequence of stages. It identifies the 5 main stages a person goes through on the way to behavior change. The change the changes of stage model holds that to get people to change their behaviors, it's necessary to determine where they are on the continuum of behavior change and then to develop interventions that move them along from stage to stage, noting that individuals may recycle some stages and therefore the process is not necessarily linear. The types of interventions needed are expected to be different at different stages. This model was incorporated in the Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids, and researchers have noted the usefulness of this theory for social marketing design and research.
Thank you. So you may say, if you're so inclined, you may say the so and so program, our community health worker program, is built on the stages of change model, which posits, and then you would write that verbatim. And if your activities are geared in that fashion, meaning that you're moving people along this continuum. This, remember, we talked earlier about whether your activities are sequential. So you may have some assessments, you may have some activities where you have some interviews or assessments to kind of gauge where people are on the continuum. Let's stick with vaccine hesitancy. You may have some activities that have people, you need to assess where they are along the continuum, and then you have different activities that are going to engage people at different stages, or depending on what level you have identified in your first process. And then as they move along that continuum, you have kind of a reward system, and then you also have a different a couple of different activities for people who may backslide or double back around. See, your logic model makes sense. Your activities will make sense in the context of that stages of change model, because your activities should demonstrate that you are addressing different levels or stages of changes. If it's between individuals, interpersonal, and community level, then your activities will demonstrate how they are engaging your participants on those different levels. And that will make sense to your funders, because they see here, oh yeah, they're using the stages of change model. So it makes sense that these activities are at different engagement levels at different times for different reasons, and they're following these different assessments. So that would be one that you would use if you have a kind of community model, moving folks along a continuum, right? So that may be a good one to use. We'll go number 2 for us, Brandy.
Number 2, health belief model. Health belief model. This model has been used extensively in public health. It says that 2 factors influence the adoption of a health protective behavior. One, a feeling of being personally threatened by a disease, and 2, a belief that the benefits of adopting this protective health behavior will outweigh the perceived costs of adopting that behavior. The health belief model has been incorporated into a number of public health campaigns to prevent AIDS and in international infant health campaigns.
Thank you. So this is more of a kind of CBT, cognitive behavioral thing for individuals. So I'll stick with vaccine hesitancy for this theory of change example. So in this context, your activities in your logic model would demonstrate how you are maybe assessing miscommunications. I'm sorry, what do we call it? Thinking about the wrong word, misinformation, right? So the idea, this one deals with the fact that individuals have to accept that something is harmful for them before they can embrace whatever the intervention may be. So if you are dealing on an individual level with your clients and you have these kind of interpersonal sessions set up where your community health workers are addressing misinformation and perhaps demonstrating the that they have individuals who had like, let's say, stick with the vaccine hesitancy, like addressing um, rumors of vaccines, and they may have to demonstrate that they have people who had done just fine. They're showing that vaccine was not harmful because they were addressing the myth that the vaccine would actually cause negative side effects. So if a lot of your activities are kind of geared toward the individual and moving them, again, not necessarily along a continuum, but kind of this binary thing, this on off, moving them from thinking this thing is harmless to accepting that it's harmful, and then moving them along toward perhaps being more open to accepting vaccines. So folks that work with readiness, community readiness for vaccines and stuff, often use this type of model. So this is helpful in that context. Number 3, please, Brandy.
Number 3, social cognitive theory. This theory suggests that self-efficacy, the belief that one has the skills and abilities necessary to perform the behavior under various circumstances, and motivation to perform the behavior are necessary for behavior change. In other words, a person has to believe that he or she can perform the behavior in various circumstances and have some incentive, whether positive or negative, to do it. The social cognitive theory also factored into the National Youth Anti-Drug Media Campaign, in which it was modeled along with attitudes and subjective norms to have a direct relationship with behavioral intentions for future drug use.
So you can see how these things can be used kind of interchangeably, or you can even use them sequentially with themselves. That's not my recommendation. My recommendation is to kind of pick one and stick with it. You may use different ones for different programs, and as Rhonda, as you're switching up your different logic models, you may also juggle your different theories of change, because often we have 2 or 3 different funders. Our programs are slightly different for the different funding sources, similar outcomes, and but kind of with different theories of approach. And in that context, each funder would get a different slightly different logic model that has a different narrative that represents a corresponding theory of change. Hit number 4 for us, Brandy. We're coming on home.
Number 4, theory of reasoned action. This theory suggests that performance of a given behavior is primarily determined by the intention to perform that behavior. The theory of reasoned action suggests that 2 major factors influence those intentions: a person's attitude toward the behavior and a person's subjective norms about the behavior, or belief that the people important to the person think he or she should or should not perform the behavior. In this regard, attitudes and subjective norms are in turn influenced by behavioral and normative beliefs. This theory is one of the most frequently used in campaign evaluations. For example, it helped guide the large-scale evaluation of the National Youth Anti-Drug Media Campaign.
Okay, so this one is good when you're looking at things that have to deal with social pressure and how crowds and groups influence people's behavior. So when you have interventions that are kind of set up to address the crowd or the group or the sub community within itself, and the idea that the community members put pressure on each other to foster behavior change, then your activities will reflect that as well. So again, you see how all of these can probably be useful. You could probably use any one of those at any given time. Your best bet is to pick one. I just chose four kind of generic ones that are really useful and kind of tried and true in public health campaigns. And they have a strong evidence base. They won't ever challenge these. Use them as they are. Use them as is. Cut and paste. Use them just like they are. And whichever one fits in closest to what you're doing, I find that these are the easiest ways to make those adjustments that Rhonda was speaking on at the beginning of this meeting. These are the easiest ways to make adjustments to your logic models when you begin to align the logic of the individual activities with the theory of change, right? This is kind of the why, right? This is why the theory of change is kind of the why this is happening in the first place. So when you tie in remember that funky language at the beginning, the what and the how, and this is kind of bringing in the whats and the ifs and the hows. And your theory of change, I think, bodes well to having people understand your logic model. Because remember, at the end of this, you do want to end up where we started, with a visual representation of program activities, but they need to fit into the overarching logic of the program. Remember, everything has to be mission centric, and all of your outcomes should be lined with priorities. And that, I think, is kind of the big takeaway here. It's the big deal. Let's pause right there. Go ahead, please.
Tariq, hi, my name is Elisa Lapolte, and I'm the new Director of Engagement for TCCN.
Yay.
Hi, so this is not my area of expertise at all, but I'm learning so much, and I appreciate this. I'm curious, how is this reason action measured? Is it by surveys?
Can be. You denote that. So you have to determine how you're going to measure all of these, and that's in your activities. So again, if you're going to suggest that you are measuring action, the question is, how are your activities set up to do that? So yes, you can absolutely measure it through surveys, but you have to justify doing that.
And this would be like a before and after survey, is that right?
Pre-test, post-test would be great. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody jump in? Yeah, this is the fun part. So please jump in. Anybody else? Because this is I think this is the biggest deal here. Once you grasp this kind of big concept here, everything should kind of fall into place with you. And then you can begin to rearrange your activities as as you need to, in terms of how they fit in with the different programs and things. So I think the theory of change part is huge. And whichever one you choose, remember, that's how you end up organizing and lining up your different options.
Tariq, this is Mary, and I just want to jump in here and underscore, like double and triple underscore, the power of cut and paste. Yes. Honestly, I mean, going through this with you and Annabelle the first couple of times we did it, first of all, I thought the theory of change was something we made up, like what was our idea here? Like never dawned on me there were actual theories of change. I didn't know about it. Right. And then I thought you had to restate it, but no, it's cut and paste. So what's so great about all of the tools that you're running through here is that they're things that you can reference when you hear the terms. You go, oh, wait, I know where to go look for that. And literally, they love it when you feed it back to them the way it has been approved in the past. So I just want to underscore, this is not really a creative exercise as much as it is knowing where to look and valuing that, copy and paste function.
I was going to add the exact same thing that Mary said, that when we were working with Tariq, we were all confused. Okay, what are we going to say here? And it was only, Tariq showed us, no, there's these 4 theory of changes are the most common in the work we do. And you identify the theory, you indicate what the theory talks about, and it's just literally the information you see here. And then how your program or your activity is tied with that. And, we learned so much about that process because, as Mary said, we thought, okay, the theory of change is that I want to do this and this is how I'm going to do it. No, there is actually, documented theory of change that we just need to apply. So, thank you, Tariq, for showing us that.
Oh, and thank you all for sharing because, yeah, it's true. Resist the temptation to be creative. You don't have to, it's not a novel. You don't have to make the language pretty. Just say the same thing over and over every time they ask a question. Because, again, it's a lot of redundancy. They want you, at the end of this, you're going to have 5 things that represent the same thing. You're going to have a logic model, you're going to have a narrative, you're going to have a project plan, a work plan, a budget, and a budget justification, and an abstract. They're all going to say the exact same thing in different formats. And that is the trick. And the discipline is to kind of stay in the lines and just give them what they're asking for, and resist the temptation to try to be creative and make it fancy. Because you say the same thing 2 different ways, they want to know the difference in the change. And you're not measuring the difference in how you said it. You want to stick with the tried and true language. So I'm glad that you all reiterated those points. This is a simple process, and what you want to do is make sure your activities are reflecting the creative way you are addressing these different changes. So I think this is a great place to pause. What time is it, Annabelle? Let's be.
It's almost noon. It's 11:51. So
Perfect. Okay, so great. So
we're good.
great. 9. We're gonna get out of here. Okay, I'm gonna give you all your lunch back. So here we go. I think we have a template here for a logic model that we can discuss really quickly. Now, we had thought originally that maybe we wanted to just fill one out, but I think you have access to us directly, so we can work with you all on a one-to-one basis. You know what? Why don't we just give them the template, Annabelle, and then show them the logic model from AmeriCorps or something? Let's do that.
Okay.
And let's do that. And then that way they can see a kind of populated one. Thank you, Brandy. And then we can kind of
Absolutely.
individually about how we can.
And this is exactly what you saw in what Brandy and Terry were showing. We start with the problem. What is it that we want to address? Just the first column. What are the inputs? What are the resources? And then which activities we were pointing out in our proposal to do this. Of course, there's not a lot of description of the activities here because those were discussed, plentiful in narrative.
That's right.
And in this case, we're talking, let's talk about one particular example. We want to address misinformation and misconceptions regarding COVID-19 vaccine. How are we going to do that? Well, we are going to provide appropriate training. This is one activity, right? One of the inputs. We're going to provide appropriate training and support to what we're calling the health ambassadors. And we're also going to strategically place them to implement the vaccine ambassador program. This is what we wanted to do. So how exactly are we going to do it? How are they going to accomplish the goal? Well, they're going to do informal social gatherings to share correct information. We're going to do outreach, awareness, and education activities. And we're going to launch the Healthy People Make Healthy Choices 2023 campaign. These are the specific activities that we listed for this particular goal. What are the outputs? Well, how exactly we're going to measure the number of individuals served. This is what we got from the performance measures documents that I show you.
Right.
Number of individuals served.
Right. They want,
right?
That's their output. They give you the outputs. That's right.
The outputs, and then the outcomes actually were also in some cases included in that document. The outcomes in this particular RFP, they wanted short-term, mid-term, and long-term. I was very stressed about that, thinking, okay, but that's a lot of terms. And there were some times that Tariq said, actually, in this particular activity, it's going to read exactly the same in each one of the columns. So the first thing short-term, it was to actually develop culturally and linguistically appropriate program support materials, because they're going out on the field to do outreach and awareness. And the midterm, is really to increase the access of those materials. And in the long term, the final result, increase the number of individuals with accurate information. So Tariq took us from what was the problem and what is the solution. So how we're going to go there, it was literally step by step.
Right. And with your own individual activities, whatever the activities are. So if you already have pre-approved activities, if you already know what you're doing, because again, this stuff is supposed to be mission centric. They don't want you to just come up with a bunch of other stuff. So you want to take the activities that you're doing, you want to align them with whatever your theory of change is, and you want to put them in a linear model. And then in that context, all you do is build, well, you build backwards or you build up or down or however you need to go from there. It is that simple. And the best thing to do is overthink it. Go ahead, Annabelle.
And also the fact that it was simple language. We're talking about just like one phrase, one sentence, not an entire description. We, why we look at different logic models, some of them from the CDC, some of them even from the Tennessee Department of Health. And there were some that were very simple, but then we look at others that there was so much information that it was so difficult to actually see easily what was being proposed.
Right. And they're and once you start to put them together, you can move things around, decide what should go in what box, and you can move them all around as you see fit. So those of you all who are subawardees, your inputs would be a subaward, for whatever your activities are. Your outcomes would be whatever the aligned with the general performance measures, and then your short-term goals. If you are developing culturally and linguistically appropriate materials, that would be a short term. You may distribute them as a midterm, and then the long term outcome is the increase in individuals with increased health knowledge, which would be perhaps gauged by your pre-test, post-test, to just kind of bring everything full circle to what everyone has kind of thrown on the table today. So I think
I wanted to share, going back to the performance measure document that we showed earlier. In this particular document, they not only show you what is really the output or the outcome that you want to measure, but even how to measure or collect the data. So this one, sometimes it has more than one. Look at this example: surveys, interviews, caseworker assessment, other instruments. So if for the particular grant that you're working on, there is a similar document, or you can do some research either with the CDC, the NIH, whomever is funding the opportunity. And if they have a national performance measure document that goes with their work, it's possible that you can also see the how to collect right there.
Right. And they give you as much, again, they are trying to help you here. They want you to have this put into place as much as possible. So please look for these different measures that they lay out. Oftentimes they give you the outputs. They'll populate the output boxes for you, and they want you, if the outputs is number of individuals served, you don't change it. It is what it is. That's an output. And you follow along with the guidance as well as possible, because again, sometimes this stuff is wonky. It doesn't always match up to each other. Stick with the RFP as much as possible. Always refer to true national performance measures, and go back and forth with your funding sources to kind of get as much clarity as possible. But I think the biggest deal here is to make sure your own model is sound within itself. This way you get your whole team on board, your funders, or at least your board, your members, your staff. This is a great way to organize your big ideas. I think it's a great place to start too. People try to do logic models at the end. They're best to do at the beginning. I would argue that the first thing you should do is try to develop your logic models and your basic and at least assess your performance measures to see whether or not, after you determine or even to figure out your eligibility for funding. So I think this is a great place to pause. You have a template that you can populate, and again, you can add more or less categories as you need them. And again, those stages, those theories of change are gold. You all take those and just use those. You may find better ones, put them in place and replace them with something better. But generally speaking, most of these can, this will cover what you all probably are doing. So I think I will stop right there for today, take questions, and see what we think.
Questions, you guys? And it's a lot of information, and I know you'll be able to review it at your own pace. I really want to reiterate that TCCN, the entire team, is here to help you. I know that Annabelle and I, before we found Tariq to help us, broke into cold sweat over some of this, a few times. We don't ever want you at any point in any of these processes that are new to you to experience that. There's no need for it. We have the team now, and I'm not that person, but we do have the team now to help you. So when you get stuck, if you feel like you may be on the wrong track or you've put something together and you think, well, maybe it's good, maybe it's not, reach out and we will connect you with the person. It may be Tariq, it may be Mary Moore, it may be Annabelle. It doesn't matter. We have a team to support you. So please don't struggle on your own. Please don't do that. You don't have time for that. And we exist to serve you because you're serving other people. So take us up on that.
Mm-hmm.
And we can help you turn it around pretty quickly too. Don't panic. Just let's just work together and get it done.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions?
Comments?
Well, I think that's it.
Okay, we want to remind you that this is part of a series. So we want to take always the last Wednesday of every month to do TTAs, different topics. We have identified enough topics for an entire year based on conversations with you guys and also based on input provided through the assessments that many of you completed as part of the Disparities Grant. There was a lot of suggestions that we really value of what we want to do. So I'm showing you right now the next two trainings. In April 13th, this is not a TTA, this is really a topic related, a general topic related. When we started with the Community Health Workers Grant and we had the training also for supervisors, we shared with all the community health worker agencies safety protocols. We want to make sure that now people, they may be going out in the community, but they could also be doing events, and we all need to learn our safety protocols. We need to learn how to de-escalate a situation or, just to do basic conflict resolution. So on April 13th at 10 a.m., we're going to have a training with Dr. Alicia Ellis. She's the clinical director at Family and Children's Service. And she is going to not only, start working with the safety protocols that Tariq shared with us in that training, but we're going to provide some basic ideas on how to de-escalate. Make sure that if and in any of these trainings, if you as an executive director, we know that your plate is full. If you're not available, but you want someone in your team to join, that's not a problem. Just ask that person to sign in. And we're always going to be recording these trainings just to make sure that then that information could be shared with anybody else within your agency. The next TTA will be April 27th. Remember that our TTAs will be approximately an hour and a half, depending on questions. We're going to continue with the series about strengthening proposals. We want to talk a little bit more about data collection and how to put together budget for grants. And in that case, we're going to do the same thing like today. We're going to provide several examples because instructions are very different between federal or state grants or even private foundations. We have multiple topics that we want to share with you. If you think of anything that it's, really pressing, just shoot us an email. Let us know what topic you want to do. We even, in one of the last minutes, somebody told us, how can I capture metrics from social media? How can I handle my social media? And Tariq added to that, how can we do a responsible social media campaign when we are talking about outreach events or we have pictures of people? How can we do that? That is actually one of the TTAs we want to share with you. So if you have any concerns, any topics that you want to share with us, feel free to send us emails and we will start posting upcoming events for several months, always in our website. So you know what is coming and you can share the information with your team. Any
All right.
questions?
If not, we're going to give you 25 minutes to enjoy lunch. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
Bye,
being here.
everyone.
Bye.
Annabelle,
Yes,
this is Lisa Eggers with Keystone Dental. How are you?
fine. Thank you. And you?
Good, good. Hey, do you know what the timeline is for the disparities outcomes to start? You know, the grant awards?
Yes, we, by the end of this month, we are going to submit the request for payment for the first round of people that participate in the assessments. That will be 2,500. Next month, the entire month of April, we will be working with work plans and we will be helping everyone that is interested in creating budgets for those work plans and submitting the work plans to our attention. We hope that the entire month will be dedicated to that. So in May, we will have a special committee evaluating those new proposals and picking those that we're going to move forward. So as soon as an organization submits the work plan, that will entitles them for additional 2,500. But the cycle that was created by the state is that we need to wait for the end of the month to submit our bill and then get that paid back by TDH so we can pay you for that the participation.
And so you guys will we be working with one of the two organizations to develop that work plan, or is that something we do?
No, we are going to connect you guys with the organization that is going to lead you the entire way. We have been exchanging a lot of emails this week,
Okay.
just preparing for that, and they are going to start connecting with you all. So there's two consultants that are going to take on the entire group.
Now, is one of those Marty Hiller?
Yes.
And then who is the other?
Hi, it's John Willis. It's John Willis or Jonathan Willis. There's both from ECHO.
Okay. I was just curious because I was looking at just my April and trying to figure out, kind of leaving some space in there just to see what I had planned.
So that's actually a good heads up. We may need to send notice to everyone, letting them know, you will receive, we were trying to clarify the process internally and which consultants were going to be working on that so we can do the appropriate introduction and let you guys know one of these individuals, and this is the contact info, will be, reaching out so you know what's happening. But April will be the month for that.
And Annabelle, how long do you think we would spend working on that? How long will they allot to each